Enforcement officials are expected to be in attendance today, but it could be in the numbers of several thousand. And following today's service, there will be a procession of vehicles to nearby Pierce Brothers Valley Oaks Memorial Park. And it's a very emotional day for a lot of people.
Extremely emotional, and we're watching right now as his casket was just taken from the hearse. And you can see it is flanked with law enforcement officers on both sides. It is draped in the American flag. Thousands of law enforcement officers from all across the state, you can see, are in attendance. They are standing in salute right now to honor this man, a 29-year veteran of the sheriff's office. Helus also spent much of his time on the SWAT team. He worked drug investigations, and sadly, he had planned to retire next year. So he was so close when this horrible incident happened at the Borderline Bar and Grill about a week ago in Thousand Oaks. He is survived by his wife and son. They are also there. Singer Billy Ray Cyrus is also there. But right now we're watching as thousands of law enforcement from across California gather here in Westlake Village to honor Ron Helus.
And of course, the public was also invited to attend this service. It's at Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village. If they aren't at the funeral, a lot of people are at the Borderline Bar and Grill. All day they are doing a fundraiser for the 11 innocent victims who Sergeant Ron Helus went in to help and to protect. He was the first officer at the scene. The sheriff calling him a hero. He called his wife after he passed away and told her he died a hero. He went in to save lives.
You can see they're playing the bagpipes right now, that procession, the people walking by. Certainly extremely difficult for all of those people there, very emotional. We heard earlier in the newscast from one of his colleagues about what a hero Ron was and what an inspiration he was to the younger officers on the force. And you can see right now that procession walking by then as they continue to play the bagpipes. Ron's wife and his son are right behind his casket. And again, that procession happening right in front of us at the Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village.
And of course, he leaves behind his wife and son. And it's just a devastating day for a lot of people in the crowd. These officers, we heard from one, many of them are evacuated right now. A lot of them have been providing support for the wildfires. Some of them have lost their homes. This all happened before the fires broke out.
Yeah.
So this area has been just devastated, whether it was mourning all of the people who died in the mass shooting. A day later, they were evacuating their homes. Thousand Oaks has been through a lot, as well as Westlake Village.
We can actually now hear the bagpipes playing. And certainly a very somber mood here in Westlake Village. Let's listen in for a moment. It is a silence that says so much, doesn't it, Suzanne?
And just seeing hundreds of officers standing in salute of one of their own, a fallen hero. When you think he was set to retire in a year, worked for 29 years, training some of these officers who I'm sure are right out front of the church right now. But they say he passed knowing full well what he was doing.
That's right. He was certainly a hero, and again, among the first officers to go inside the Borderline Bar and Grill on November 7th. He rushed in despite the danger, despite the gunfire. He immediately engaged the gunman in a shootout. He was struck by multiple bullets. And again, you can hear the bagpipes playing. Oh, we just heard certainly a very powerful rendition of Amazing Grace from those bagpipes. Before that, Danny Boy. A lot of silence inside this church here in Westlake Village right now, all to pay respect for Sergeant Ron Helus. Again, you could see his flag-draped casket now inside the church. The funeral set to start in about a half hour.
Ventura County Sheriff Jeff Dean says of Ron, he was a hardworking, dedicated sheriff sergeant. He died a hero and went in to save lives. He knew him well. They worked out together. Helus spent much of his career, that was 9 years long, on the SWAT team, also worked drug investigations. He had planned to retire next year. In fact, he set an example for other people on the force, and of everybody we've talked to, they say he was the first person they expected to go in. He had been on the phone with his wife talking to her, and he told her he loved her and said he'd call her right back. But the next person to call his wife was, of course, Sheriff Dean, to let her know that she had lost her husband.
Such a tremendous loss, not only for his family, but the entire department and the community. Of course, his courageous actions are credited with saving others, and he helped allow several people to escape, and it ended up costing him his own life, unfortunately. Let's go to our Dave Lopez, who is also live there. Dave, can you hear us?
Yes, we're right outside the church. At the family's request, no cameras are on the church property. Everything you see is with a pool. The microphones behind me are set up because we understand that a family representative is going to make a quick statement to us before the funeral starts. We haven't heard that that's about to change. No one from the immediate family of the wife and the son will not be saying anything to the media. There is a huge presence here. This is a Calvary Chapel church that is very popular in this area. I believe that the sergeant went to this church here. That's what I'm being told. It holds capacity close to 3,000, and I think it's going to be jam-packed. Driving up here, you could see officers from all over Southern California driving up here, and there's a steady stream behind me. These are the dignitaries, either personal family friends or other family members, maybe government officials. They have the pass to come in and park on the parking lot here. Many of the other people, I don't know if you can see any of them behind me, but most of them are walking, and it's a good walk. They're parked quite a few blocks away, walking up to this church. The public has been invited, and a number of people from the public, you can tell, are coming here. We also understand that Governor Jerry Brown is supposed to be here. Will make an appearance at the services. We don't think he's going to say anything, at least we're told not to. The one thing I kept hearing from different people is that the mourning process, the ability to let all this sink in and mourn and have a good cry, if you will. They said that a lot of the members of the Sheriff's Department didn't get that opportunity because you got to remember, he was shot and killed, and then that very same morning, or I should say in the late afternoon, is when all the massive fires broke out, and then they had to switch gears and do what they had to do during that fire. So they were extremely busy. Talk about two bombshells, one right after another, but that's what happened to the members of this department. And so one of the officers didn't want to go on camera, but said, we really haven't had a chance to let this sink in and mourn. Today, I think, is going to be that slap to the side of the face, if you will, realizing exactly what has happened. It has just been an unbelievable period of time, 7 days, for the people who live in this community. And again, as we reported earlier, when all this happened, the day it happened, this is a community where you just don't get this kind of crime. People move to this beautiful area to get away from crime. You heard the story of the sergeant, how he was on the phone with his wife, something that was very typical that they do, a little lull in the patrol that he had. He was on the phone with his wife and said, "I'll see you afterward," and she said, "I'll have something for you," and he said, "I love you, and I'll see you a little bit." And then he said he interrupted the phone call because he got the call, the call of an urgent matter, and that was the shooting at the bar. And less than 20 minutes after he spoke to his wife, telling her that he loved her, he was shot and killed. So there will be a tremendous farewell for him. A number of speakers, we are told that this will last about 90 minutes. They want to get this done and everybody out of here by 1:30, I am told. A very solemn procession, a very solemn service. As you mentioned, officers from all over the country are here. And I think what's going to happen later on today, as we mentioned, I think the real shock of what happened. People have been so immersed in all of the fires and what have you, but today I think is a day that they're going to say, this is what happened. Everything we know about this man bodes that he was a kind of a guy that would give everything for his fellow officers. He was a training officer. He was a member of the SWAT team. He was a mentor. He was the kind of guy that people would want to go up and talk to him about a number of different things. Again, another case of a very good man gone much too soon. I'm Dave Lopez. That's it for now. I'll send it back to you in the studio.
And Dave, you are certainly right about that. He has gone too soon. And you mentioned something interesting, the fact that these officers, the deputies out there, other members of law enforcement haven't really had a lot of time to necessarily grieve, considering what a chaotic week it's been. Are you seeing that it's hitting a lot of people today for the first time, perhaps?
Yeah, very much so. You see it on faces. I've covered way too many of these funerals for officers who've been killed in the line of duty, and there is a sense of grieving. They talk to you, they say hi, how you doing, but you can tell that this is a very, very sad day for this community. Especially when you stop and think about all of the circumstances. But no, I know that this is going to be a very tear-filled event, and I know enough about losing someone very close to you and death in your family and someone that you love and cherish and miss them very greatly. It's you go through a period there where all of a sudden it hits you. It hits you and you feel like you're the only person left in the world. And I think a lot of people today are going to feel that way.
Thank you so much, Dave Lopez. In Westlake Village, it is a tough day. Of course, the community hasn't had the chance to grieve because right after the passing of Sergeant Ron Helus, wildfires broke out all across the area. Sergeant Ron Helus went into the borderline shortly after 11 p.m. last Wednesday night. It was college night at borderline 18 and over night. So a lot of the people there were 18 teenagers, some of them there with their parents, a very community-based bar and grill that a lot of people like to frequent. And Sergeant Ron Helus was just a block away talking to his wife on the phone when he heard the alert. CHP backed him up. He went in. He was the first officer inside. CHP was there to cover his back, but unfortunately, he was riddled with bullets. The officers pulled him out, but fortunately, the shooting stopped and the gunman died, and 11 innocent victims also passed, but we don't know how many more people may have lost their lives if not for his presence.
Certainly, he is a hero, and the emotion is still raw for so many of his colleagues. We spoke earlier with Sergeant Eric Bouchot from the Ventura County Sheriff's Office about his colleague Ron Helus. Here's what he just told us.
We haven't had a chance to stop and just hug it out and cry or do any of that. In a way, I'm looking forward to us being able to just grieve and properly pay tribute to Ron. The guys that had 1, 2, 3 years on the streets, so pretty early in their careers, they said, you know what, whenever I went to a hot call and I was a little nervous, and then I heard Ron on the radio that he was on scene or he was coming, it calmed them because they knew he was just calm, cool. He always said, the most important thing, at the end of your shift, go home to your family. We all get to do that, but he doesn't. It's just, he's a hero.
Oh, you could just hear the emotion in his voice. If you were just joining us here on CBS 2 News, we are on an extended version of our newscast. The Young and the Restless, by the way, is also now airing on our sister station, KCAL 9, as we continue to remember Sergeant Ron Helus here on CBS 2 News. It just goes to show you the impact he had on the entire community. We just heard from Sergeant Bouchot about how even the younger deputies, they looked up to him too, knowing that he was such a beacon of bravery and confidence, and that he was somebody who was always willing to go in first, always willing to put himself before others, and certainly he paid the ultimate sacrifice most recently at the Borderline Bar and Grill. And again, you mentioned, Suzanne, his courageous actions are credited with saving countless lives, and he helped people escape.
That's right, about 200 people in that crowded bar, just people having a good time, a lot of them not even 21, 18 years old. We know at least one person passed away who was just 18, just starting her life. The sheriff actually said of Ron that he was a hardworking, dedicated sheriff sergeant. He says he was totally committed, gave his all, and that night told him, I told his wife he died a hero because he went in to save lives, to save other people's lives. He was a 29-year veteran of the department, just a year away from retiring. He leaves behind his wife and grieving son. And of course, Calvary Chapel is filled with people, the majority of them officers, who of course take priority because these were his colleagues. These are people who risk their own lives and risk their family's security every night they go to work or every morning. But of course, a lot of people in the community showing their support for Sergeant Ron Helus because he saved countless lives and he provided the support when most people would be running out of a scene like that. He ran
into it, and that's what all of our law enforcement does each and every day for us. It really puts it into perspective how dangerous the job is. And also, it's you just mentioned all the people in the community, Suzanne. Think about the fact that at this time, almost exactly at this time a week ago, all these people, many of them were lining the 101 freeway and side streets to honor Sergeant Helus as the procession went by. Well, now a lot of these people are here at the Calvary Chapel Community Church in Westlake Village. That funeral is set to begin in about a half hour, and then the procession, of course, will follow to the Pierce Brothers Valley Mortuary and Cemetery, where he will be laid to rest. Let's check back in with our CBS 2's Dave Lopez, who is live outside the church. And Dave, still some people gathering?
Oh, yes. It's a steady stream of people. I just saw a couple of people from the LAPD. I saw a couple of people from the LA County Sheriff's Department that have walked by. Again, it's a steady stream of people. The church is quite a good walk from here. We're at the entrance of the parking lot. And again, this church will be filled to capacity. They invited members of the just from the public to show up, but the majority of the people here will be from law enforcement, dressed in their uniforms, come here to the one thing about law enforcement, you cover so many of these, and it's the same feeling. It's a brotherhood. Everyone is one. It's, all for one, one for all. If you lose someone from a department that you have no idea who he is, you still feel a loss because that's just the camaraderie of it. And so they're here. They're here to pay their respects. I'm sure there is a great deal of questioning and wondering why. Why would this have to happen? And we have someone walking over right now. In a couple of minutes here. That's okay. Come on over, sir. As I told you, a family member is going to make a statement here. Sir, Dave Lopez, Channel 2.
Eric Busha.
Hi, we're on live right now.
Sure.
We were talking earlier, and maybe you can talk on this a little more. You didn't have a chance to grieve. I mean, you went from one disaster to another, and the reality, I guess, is going to hit today.
This is it for us. Today is our first chance. You're right. We've been moving at 100 miles an hour all day, every day, and our resources have been stretched pretty thin. So this is really the first opportunity for us as an agency, as a family.
Yeah, why don't you step over here in just a couple of seconds here. Excuse me here. I don't want to cut you off, but this is a family member that's going to speak, and we'll listen to what he has to say, and then we'll talk to you in a second. Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. This is a family member, a family friend, who is going to speak. He's just coming up to the microphone right now, and hopefully he'll give us his name.
Pastor Charlie.
On behalf of Ron's family and friends, I want to express appreciation and deep gratitude for the many expressions of kindness, for the prayers, for the thoughts, for all that's been done for the family. It's truly a community pulling together, and it's a wonderful thing, and the family's deeply appreciative, and thank you for your support, for your ongoing prayers. And we're going to ask God's blessing upon our day and upon Karen and the family and the days to come, and certainly all of those who serve our communities in such a dynamic and powerful and sacrificial way. So thank you. They're doing good. They have, they're people of faith, and faith sustains us during these days. And they pulled together as a family and certainly as a law enforcement community, and they're doing very well given the circumstances.
Pastor, how do you explain bad things happening to good people?
We trust that God is able to work out His good will in the midst of whatever difficult circumstances we face. That's a promise of Scripture. That's the hope that we cling to because of our faith in Christ and in His death, burial, and resurrection. And that is our hope, and that's what sustains us through the tough days of life. the family's doing well as can be expected. And again, their trust is in God and Christ, their Savior, and the whole community has pulled together. And regardless of faith, persuasion, or background, or the different kinds of occupations that are represented, everybody has pulled together in such a marvelous way, and it's a true expression of what community is all about. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us interrupt us. You were saying it's just so emotional today.
Yeah, it's this is, like I said, our first opportunity to come together. His law enforcement family, and all our sisters and brothers and law enforcement agencies from throughout Southern California, throughout the state, and many people have come from across the country as well.
You knew him well?
I knew Ron well. We worked together on and off throughout our careers. You know, with a county agency of the size that we are, you move around and into different assignments, but our careers have crossed paths many times, and he was just a wonderful guy. I mean, a big grin on his face. You know, he had a great sense of humor, but he was serious about the job. He would go to the limits to serve the community, whether he's working cases as a detective, working on a narcotics team, as a SWAT team member. He was all in. He was all in.
I know the department and all your men and women were very busy, jumping from one disaster to another, but now that you've had time to soak it in, how is, as a group, are you holding up pretty well? Have you had some counseling? Have you had some days off? You had some people come in and say, yeah, get away from it for a while?
You know, I can't speak to that, David, because to my knowledge, nobody has had any days off with the because we had to evacuate 100,000 people in southeastern Ventura County just for the impacts that we had from the Woolsey fire, not taking into account, I mean, working with our partners in LA County, they were impacted as well. So today's really the first day that things are settling down. Yeah. So I don't know that anybody's had any days off.
How about you?
Today's the first day where it's kind of sinking in, and we have a chance to get together as an agency and, like I said, as a family, and this will be the time that we can honor him and maybe start to take stock of what's happened here.
I don't know his background and his history, but I take it he had the reputation that to him danger was second nature. That's part of the job, and that's why he went in the way he went in.
Absolutely. I mean, he trained throughout his career. He was a SWAT team member. Like I said, he was a firearms instructor. I mean, he has been to many, many critical incidents. Certainly nothing quite of the magnitude of what happened last Wednesday night, but he was calm, he was prepared, and he did what he had to do. And the guys on his shift, I've had a chance to talk to several of them and get some feedback, and especially the younger deputies who have worked just 2-3 years out on the streets have all said that if they get a hot call and they're feeling a little anxious or nervous and they're there on scene and they hear Ron's voice on the radio that he's on his way or he's showing up, it's a calming thing. It has a calming effect because he was just always so cool and knew exactly what to do.
Yeah. And again, this is not a community where you would have a lot of murders, a lot of shootings, things like that. You know, as I said earlier, people move here to get away from that. So this had to be doubly shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how you even categorize what happened last week between the shooting and then while we're still on scene and just beginning to deal with that investigatively and everything, then these fires start and literally surround the very city where the shooting happened.
Yeah. The other thing that people keep saying is that he, despite the fact that he was gunned down very quickly, his actions probably prevented other people from getting killed.
Undoubtedly, that's true. Because if the suspect's focus was on Ron and the CHP officers going in there, then his focus was not on those other innocent people in there, and that gave them time to move away and get out, those who could.
The CHP officer, not much has been said about him. His name hasn't been released. Is he doing okay?
Honestly, David, the last I saw him was in the early morning hours, just within a couple hours of the shooting, and he was having a tough time, as we all were. So I haven't had a chance to reconnect with him. I know the people from his agency were there from minute one, working with us and providing the support. And but I imagine it's an incredibly traumatic event for him.
These are always tough. I can't remember in the years that I've been in Southern California the last time you had an officer from Ventura County killed on the line of duty.
I can tell you when it was 4 years ago. It was October of 2014.
And what was the situation? Do you remember?
He was struck and killed by a drunk driver while he was on a traffic stop.
How about a shooting? Do you remember a shooting?
The last time was 1996 that I'm aware of was a shooting.
You don't forget moments like that, do you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
One final point, and we appreciate you staying here with us. How do you want people to remember him best?
Without a doubt, he was a hero. Absolutely. His actions were heroic, but not just what he did Wednesday night, but throughout his career in service to this community. We all owe him a great debt of gratitude.
Sir, thank you very much for your time. Okay, take care of yourself too. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. As you can see, as he admitted, it's tough. It's just now sinking in. It's a very, very difficult period of time. The service will begin in about 15 minutes. We were told it'll be about 90 minutes long. A number of speakers. His wife will not speak, neither will his son. The pastor said it best. They are a family of faith. They have a strong belief. And at a time like this, that's probably one of the things that carries you through. For now, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dave. And earlier, Sergeant Eric Bouchot, who you just heard speak, we had an interview with him from earlier where he was crying, and it's so rare to see somebody from law enforcement break down in tears. And
we also saw Sergeant Jeff Dean do the same from the Ventura County. I mean, it just goes to show the outpouring of emotion right now. And as we keep saying and we keep hearing from folks who are there, they really haven't had time to process this. They haven't had days off to even really stop and take it all in because they've been nonstop.
Yeah, he said today is the first day they've taken a moment to grieve. The morning that it was announced that he had passed away, just hours later is when the fire was reported in the area. So all of these officers that you see, if they're local and even many of them from out of state, they have been helping with all of the fires, the Woolsey fire, the Hill fire, that has left thousands of people homeless and killed at least 3 people. They have been working to help the community. Haven't taken any days off. This is the first moment they're taking to grieve, and I'm sure many of them won't be having a day off anytime soon. They're going right back into the fire zone and just helping the members of their community.
And we heard from that pastor a very powerful message about how they are relying on faith and that the community is rallying behind not only the family but the department and each other right now through this difficult time. Again, this is happening at the Calvary Chapel Community Church in Westlake Village. The funeral service officially set to begin in about 13 minutes, but then the procession will follow to the Pierce Brothers Valley Mortuary and Cemetery. That is where Sergeant Ron Helus will be laid to rest. The 54-year-old, we keep saying, was just such an example for everyone in this department, just a year away from retirement.
That's right, and Sergeant Eric Bouchot just said the words that just get you. He was all in. They say no matter what he was doing, Sergeant Helus was all in. He would go to the limit to serve the community, and unfortunately he lost his life saving others. And the family member who spoke said they are a family of faith. They have pulled together as a family and as a law enforcement family as well. We, of course, know the law enforcement family is very strong. Those bonds, they understand the risk that they go into every day. They risk their lives. And the family members said they trust God can work out his goodwill despite these circumstances, and that their faith is what sustains them in this heartbreaking time.
Heartbreaking is an understatement. He was a sergeant, wasn't he? He was someone who always, as you said, was all in, would go in first, set the example for so many. And in this case, he was one of the first officers to go inside the Borderline Bar and Grill on the night of November 7th, he knew the danger he faced. He called his wife to say, "I love you," and then immediately engaged the gunman in a shootout. He was hit by multiple bullets before he was killed. And again, right now, the focus, though, is on his life and the positive example that he set and the good he did for the community and in trying to save lives and protect those who were in danger. So we certainly, the word hero, you know, we hear that word, and it is cliched sometimes when we hear the word hero, but in this case, he truly was a hero in every sense of the word, wasn't he?
Yes, he called CHP officers who were just a few minutes away, but he went in alone into the bar and engaged with the gunman, and CHP officers, they backed him up, but they had to take him out of the line of fire, take him to the hospital, where he died just a few hours later. So he went in alone. He was supported by law enforcement, but he was the first one to go in and save countless lives. Everybody who we talked to who was at the Borderline Bar and Grill say it was packed. It was college night. We had teenagers in there. We had parents of teenagers in there. Talking to some of the people who were there, they said it was like hell looking around. People were climbing over bodies, that they had survivor's guilt for not running back inside because your gut instinct is to just run out. Now, our Kara Finstrom is live outside of Calvary Chapel where the funeral is happening, or is set to happen in just about 10 minutes. Kara, how's it looking out there?
Well, one of the things that's really struck me out here, Suzanne, is this is a time for all these first responders who did respond that night and who have been working on the fire lines to come together. They haven't had time to grieve and to remember this sergeant. Behind us here, we watched as firefighters unfurled very slowly and methodically this large, beautiful American flag and then hung it from the ladders above. We've watched a long line of both law enforcement from across the state. A number of different agencies are here, file in under that flag. Also people from the community. Many of them turned out that day after the shooting. When we learned that this sergeant had passed away, they lined the streets there as that procession took him from the hospital, took his body in a very ceremonial procession from the hospital there to the funeral home. And so many of them came back out today to pay their respects. We also know there are a number of dignitaries here today. The governor was expected to come as well. And if we look inside now, we understand the line of cars that was really lined up and down around the block waiting to get into the parking lot to get inside. That has now ceased. So we believe everyone is in the process of getting into their seats inside so that hopefully this can begin at about 12 noon. Peter, Suzanne?
All right, Kara, thank you so much. And Kara mentioned just how somber it was when we saw his casket go by and all of the law enforcement standing at attention there. Right now, the silence filling that church says so much. It speaks volumes, doesn't it, to see as they prepare for the funeral service to begin. Of course, his family is there, not only law enforcement officers from Ventura County, but all across California, all across the country, gathered here, the Calvary Chapel Community Church in Westlake Village. People who had never even met Sergeant Helas. They wanted to be here. They wanted to pay their respects and just honor a man who really was a hero and gave his life in the line of duty.
And we have a live interview standing by outside the church. We'd like to listen in.
I would have been there too. I don't know what I would have done. I would have been looking for her. So it was hard to wrap my mind around.
Did your sister see the officer walk in at the time, or does she recall?
She had told me she didn't see the shooter. She just heard the gunshots and tried to run for the back door, and she tripped over a ladder that apparently was planted there because it's never there, and it was blocking the back door, and people were tripping and falling, and she was getting trampled, and a young man picked her up and carried her out.
So we're on live right now. Your name is what? We just come on live right now.
Destiny Malibu.
And your sister was the one that was in.
She was at the borderline shooting, yes.
After you heard the story about the sergeant that was killed, I guess you label him as a hero as well?
Oh, he's a hero in every definition. We'll forever honor him and remember him for saving so many lives, including my sister's.
Destiny, how do you process all of this?
It's very difficult to have your sister in a shooting and then have your childhood lifelong home burned down the next day. Is a lot to process. Back to back. Yes. So.
What community?
When were you there Friday?
Malibu.
How did it happen, that part?
Well, my sister, after the whole thing had happened, we went to the vigil in Thousand Oaks. And then we went home and we were sitting in our room for a little bit, and our parents woke us up at 5 in the morning. We didn't get an evacuation warning, but our parents saw the smoke was coming very close on both sides of our mountain. We live right next to Calamigos Ranch. So.
And your home burned down. How's your sister holding up right now?
I mean, my sister's a very strong woman, and I've always looked up to her for that. So she's holding it together, I think, mostly for the rest of us, though, because we're kind of falling apart.
Yeah, how about the rest of the family?
It's been really hard. Yeah, we're staying with family in LA, but it's a lot to process.
I can imagine. And you're here. You feel you need to be here.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was difficult to plan it all out and how to get here, but we had to be here.
Your mom is right there. How is she holding up? How's she doing?
She's struggling. I mean, you know, it's her baby, and being at a shooting like that, you can't really put that into words. So, you know, we're all trying to comfort each other during this time. It's not easy.
But your sister doesn't recall seeing the officer run in or anything like that?
No, she doesn't recall. She just heard the gunshots and ran for the back exit. Someone had broken the window. I talked to some other friends that were there that night too, and someone had broken the window, and the people didn't know if they broke the window. There were more gunmen, and people were breaking the windows to get in. It was just a total disaster.
I mean, you got the shooting, you got the fire. I mean, you must be saying to yourself, what next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm praying to God that that's it. But
Destiny, some of the things that you're saying, his family, Sergeant Helis's family,
yes,
can hear that. They can feel what you're feeling. Certainly appreciative of that. Everyone's been calling him a hero, and for you personally, and what he did. I mean, his first movement in there is what kind of made everything end. Got the shooter down.
Yes.
You know, it's the first step towards all that. So you see him as a hero as well.
Yes, absolutely. He's a hero in every way, and God bless Ron Helis's family and friends, and we will forever honor him.
We'll let you talk about 10 minutes before the hour. We'll let you go into the show. Thank you for talking to us very much. And again, your name again, I'm sorry?
Destiny Malibu.
Okay, and your sister is?
Desiree.
Desiree. So her sister was in the bar and was escaped, not injured recovering from injuries. She wasn't shot or anything?
No, she just has some bruises and scrapes and stuff.
All right, okay. And again, in your own words, you're here to
honor Ron Helis and his amazing bravery, and for saving so many more kids and my sister.
All right, thank you very much. Again, we're less than 5 minutes away, but you heard her story. They consider this officer a hero. And, of course, the tragic events, the day-to-day, the sister involved in the shooting, then the very next day their home in the Malibu area burned to the ground. So it's quite emotional, as you can imagine. So we'll send it back to you.
Emotional in so many ways, Dave. That young woman, what a powerful account she had there, not only about her sister, but also the fact that these poor people not only went through the mass shooting, then some of them had their homes burned down in her case.
Yes, her sister barely survives this mass shooting, survives this massacre, and then they go to the memorial for the victims and return to their home and it's burned down. It's just incredible to think of what these people are going through. But also, they came out to support Sergeant Ron Helis, and we're going to go back to our Dave Lopez. What's happening out there right now, Dave?
What is your name?
Carmen. Edmund.
This is the mother of the young woman that we just finished talking to. She's the mother of the woman that we just spoke to.
She didn't make it today. It is too much. She went through that, and then we lost our house a few hours later in the fire. So it's been no sleep. You know, our emotions are all over the place. You know, we cry in freaking restaurants. I'm sorry if...
Is this therapy to be here today for you?
You know, it is, but more than anything, we're here to honor Ron. I mean, my legs are wobbly right now just talking to you guys, reliving the fact that I was on the phone with my daughter while the gunshots were still ringing. So it's very difficult, but at the same time, it's an honor to be here. Like I told somebody before, I would have walked here if I had to, despite the fact that we're homeless at this point. I would have walked from downtown LA to get here.
You were on the phone with your daughter and you could hear the gunshots?
Yes.
Explain that. What was happening?
She called us and told us that there was a shooting at the borderline, which is, we consider one of the safest cities, one of the safest places. There's always police there, and I was in shock. We were in shock. My husband and I were both together when she called, and we tried to just keep her calm while we stayed calm, but really not knowing if she was going to make it out alive. We really had no idea.
When you hear what the officer did, when did you first hear about what he did, barging in like that and sort of diverting the gunman, I guess?
You know, we heard about it probably from Elizabeth Espinosa. We know her intimately as a friend, and my daughter Desiree was watching the news and listening, and I believe that's when we found out.
How are you holding up right now?
My heart is racing. Just thankful, though, more than anything. You know, I'm feeling thankful and grateful, and so happy to be here to honor Ron and everyone who has done such a beautiful job at protecting our kids. I mean, the FBI was incredibly gracious and kind and loving towards us, and all the officers. We just can't thank them enough.
We'll let you get in so you can get a seat. The service is about to start. Again, this is the mother of the young lady who was shot. And again, these stories, it's just it's remarkable. What else can you say? So they want to get into, they can pay their respects to a man that they consider a hero. Sandra, back to you.
All right, Dave Lopez reporting live. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Mitchell. You are watching extended live coverage here on CBS 2 News, the memorial service for Ventura County Sheriff's Deputy Sergeant Ron Helus. We can tell you that thousands of people right now are gathered to pay their respects. It is a day of grieving and also a day of gratitude for this man who really gave his life to protect others in his own community. If you're looking for your regular CBS programming, you can find that on our sister station, KCAL 9. This service set to begin any moment now. The Ventura County Sheriff's Deputy, 54 years old, he was shot and killed just over a week ago as he rushed into the Borderline Bar and Grill. There were reports of an active shooter. He didn't hesitate. He went in and engaged the gunman, saving so many lives, but in the end, he lost his own. Sergeant Helus was wounded inside the bar. He was rushed outside and rushed to the hospital. And how well we remember that long procession from exactly 1 week ago, where thousands of people gathered on the freeways and alongside the roads here in Southern California to pay their respects. It's been a troublesome week. It's been a heartbreaking week for so many people in our community. But today, they get to come together. Many of these people who survived the fires, but who have lost their homes, who owe so much gratitude to this sheriff's deputy. They are gathered now. Finally, a chance for them to come together and say goodbye. The sheriff last week said that this was a cop's cop, a guy who was totally committed to his job. He had 2 other things that came before his job, his wife Karen and his 24-year-old son Jordan. How much we have learned about this deputy in the past week as we watch the coffin being carried in. This was almost 1 hour ago. As his body was brought into the church, his wife Karen, his son, walking behind the casket. You can see it is draped with a flag. There were bagpipers, always a somber sight to see. We know Sergeant Helus was a man who loved his job, a man who trained other deputies, who was beginning to look to life beyond being a sheriff's deputy. He was planning for his retirement in the next year. He had started a business teaching new gun owners gun safety. He recently completed his master's degree online. His wife was said to be so proud of him that he completed this degree even while working a full-time job for the Sheriff's Department. And this is a guy who was so well known in his community. Went to Starbucks every morning, like so many of us, to get his coffee. Always cheerful, always happy. The guy who would help anyone. His neighbors say that they knew they could call Sergeant Helus anytime of day or night, and that he was always there to help. If they heard a strange noise in the neighborhood, this was the guy he called. His fellow deputies also knew him as the guy who would always have your back. We've heard so many stories this morning of how younger sheriff's deputies said they were comforted when they were responding to a call, and they just knew that Ron was going to be there too, that he was going to show up. So we are waiting for this ceremony. We know singer Billy Ray Cyrus will be singing today. Ron Helus loved country music. And when he responded to that call last Wednesday night, it was a country music bar, the Borderline Bar and Grill, such a popular place for families and for young people to gather in that community. He only knew that there was a report of an active shooter. He was talking to his wife on the phone. Like so many nights before, he said, I gotta go, I got a call, I love you, I'll talk to you later. It was the last phone call he made. The next contact his wife got was from the sheriff telling him that she is sorry, but he had passed away. It looks like the service for Sergeant Ron Helus is just about to begin at the Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village. You can see somebody just walking up to the microphone. As we mentioned, Sergeant Helus was set to retire in just about a year. This was a guy who loved fishing. He loved to go up to the Sierras, to Mammoth Mountain, often went fishing with his son, who was considered his best friend. A man who just wanted to serve his community, and he did that for almost 30 years. And we see the respect that he had earned by the number of people inside this church, this community church in Westlake Village. They are there to honor him as a person and also as a man who really did serve his community. Shot to death, the first sheriff's deputy killed in the line of duty in more than 4 years there in Ventura County. We've got a number of reporters outside the church. We want to go to our Dave Lopez, who's been standing by and just watching all of this. And Dave, I know you've witnessed so many of these, and it's also just such a sad sight for so many people. We'll get to Dave in just a moment. Again, we're standing by waiting for this ceremony for Sergeant Ron Helus to begin. We mentioned that he liked to go to Starbucks in the morning. He worked out at his local gym where he was well known. And I understand inside that gym, the elliptical that he trained on is now a place where they have put flowers, and they cordoned it off, not allowing anyone else to use it, just a tribute to this man who touched so many lives. All right, Dave Lopez standing by. And Dave, I know you've been hearing so many stories about what a great public servant he was, but also what a great guy Sergeant Helus was.
Well, we heard people talk about the fact that he was the go-to guy, if you will. Every athletic team has the go-to guy, the person that you always rely on in the clutch. And apparently that's the way he was to the younger officers, to the veteran officers. You heard one of his fellow sheriff deputies tell us that whenever there was trouble, whenever there was a difficult situation, that deputy, he or she, would always go to this man for advice, and that he would gladly give it. He was a giant. I mean, there's no other way to describe a man of this kind of personality and trait. Everything that we have heard about him is terrific. I mean, you have a woman and her daughter who not only had a daughter involved in the shooting, is recovering from that shooting, but then the very next day their home burns down. The woman told us, the mother told us that she's virtually homeless, but she said, I would have walked here in order to get here to pay my respect to this Officer Helus. So I think that speaks volumes in itself. I mean, this church is packed. People coming from all over, not only Southern California, but from the country. This has touched so many people. And again, you can't help but when something like this happens, you always ask your questions. Why does it always happen to the good guys? Why can't we ever hear a story where somebody who was just a rotten, lousy human being, but it doesn't happen that way. I mean, we're the good men, the good women, they seem to be in the line of fire as this man was. And again, they talk about the new kind of tactics since Columbine. You don't sit and wait. You go in where the danger is, and you try to wipe it out immediately. And that's what he was doing. I mean, he was no rookie. He was no slouch at this. He was on the SWAT team. He trained people, as you mentioned. He was running a business on gun safety and everything. So this man knew what he was doing. It was just a terrible, unfortunate set of circumstances in which he lost his life. But what struck me the most of this morning is not only from people talking to us and getting a little bit more insight into the man, but what really struck me is this family, this mother and daughter, taking the time. I mean, imagine, someone in your family is shot and then your house burns down the next day. Let's be honest, the last thing you're ever going to think of is going to a funeral of a man you didn't know. And yet they felt so compelled, and they said it's an honor to be here. So that has touched me very much. I think it's also touched a lot of other people. I understand the service is about to begin, so I'll send it back to you.
All right, Dave, thank you for that. We want to go to Cara Finstrom. She is also outside the church right now. And Cara, I understand you have someone who worked with Sergeant Helus with you.
I do. You know, so many of these deputies and these sergeants knew him so well, and they've been grieving. And Senior Deputy Jacob Holt was telling us that this outpouring of support from the community has been important for all of you.
It's been amazing. People have dropped flowers, cards. The New York Yankees even sent flowers, you know, all the way from the opposite side of the country. And everybody's been incredibly supportive of law enforcement and supporting Ron and his family. And it means a lot to us, and we're very appreciative of that.
I know you said you met him very early on in your career when you were just really young.
Yeah, I was just a deputy, and he was on the SWAT team, and I was starting off in the jail, and that's my first interaction with him was I was working in custody.
And from what I've heard from other deputies and sergeants out here today, he was kind of this calm force that a lot of the younger officers looked up to.
He was very, very mild-mannered, very mellow. You know, he'd throw some jokes, you know, when you got to know him a little bit. He's a great man. Really cared about his shift. He was working as a shift sergeant out here in Thousand Oaks, and every briefing he went over with his shift to be careful, take care of themselves, be safe. He stressed and talked a lot about being mentally prepared for their shift and the things they might encounter, because you know, if your mind's, it's hard for the body to go somewhere that the mind has never gone, and that was really big with him.
I know one of the other sergeants I spoke with this morning also said this is not just about one day, this remembrance for him. What he did was heroic, obviously last week, but that he had put himself in the line of fire and in danger many other times.
100%. I mean, there's a lot of things that goes on in the law enforcement community. Even, you know, we're lucky. We live in a great area of Ventura County, but you know, there's things that go on and happen, and a lot of them, you know, we don't talk about. It's part of the job. You deal with it, and then you move on. The biggest thing with this incident for Ron was the sacrifice that he gave, and he did exactly what we're taught and trained to do. We're trained in an active shooter situation to put our bodies between the civilians and the suspect, and that's exactly what he did. And he made us all very proud, and he did law enforcement right. He did a great job.
A huge loss for his family as well, not just your family, but his family.
I can't even imagine a year away from retirement. You know, when you're going to spend those nice, good quality years with your family. I feel terrible for his family.
I know there's been quite a bit of setup for this, but at the same time, all of you were dealing with the Woolsey fire. What does it mean to be here today with everyone hoisting this huge American flag, coming together, and finally getting a chance to grieve?
It's been hard. It's been really hard. I know we have a lot of deputies struggling. It's been kind of a good and bad thing. The fires have taken our attention, our focus a little bit away from what happened at Borderline and what happened to Ron. But I think it's going to hit really hard once things calm down. Today is kind of the start of everybody with the grieving process and paying their respects to Ron and kind of just absorbing what happened and the tragedy to our entire community.
Can we talk a little bit more about him as an officer, as a sergeant? I understand he served on the SWAT team for many years.
He did. I'm currently on our SWAT team, and Ron was on the team prior to me, but he did years on the SWAT team, and then, you know, moved on from there.
And he also served in narcotics, is that right, for a while?
I believe so, yes. I believe he was on our narcotics team.
So served in so many different facets of your office.
The great thing about the sheriff's office is we have a lot of different jobs: detectives, narcotics, gangs, regular patrol, all kinds of different assignments. So it does make it nice. You can move around if you want to, and you get a lot of different experience. Ron had great experience and great training.
Is there a memory you're holding on to of him? You've known him for years, and it's probably hard to single out one, but is there a memory or two you're holding on to?
So Ron, the greatest thing I think that Ron, first of all, he kind of gave me some diet advice because he lost a lot of weight and had changed his diet, and he had some advice for me. But we used to work out together at George Urban Camarillo, the gym, and whenever we'd talk, he's just such an upbeat, positive guy. You know, just the way he was is always say hi. Even if I wasn't looking, he'd walk up behind me, put his hand on my shoulder, and say hi to me. He had his favorite machines there at the gym that he'd always be on, and just his attitude, just fantastic guy. It's a huge loss to his family first and foremost, but to our agency and community also.
All right, thank you so much for joining us here live. We really appreciate it. Sandy, are we getting ready to begin inside?
Cara, it looks like perhaps we are just moments away from that. I was struck by what Deputy Holt said. We can learn so much by knowing that someone was a sheriff's deputy for 29 years, but you learn even more when you hear that he's the kind of guy that would walk up and put his hand on your shoulder just to say hi. And I know so many people have such great and respectful memories of him.
Yeah, and our anchor back at the station was saying that he was the type of person that would come up and just put his hand on his shoulder to say hello. And so many people in this community have memories of him.
It's hard to forget a guy like Ron. This community, I'm born and raised Thousand Oaks, and that's one of my favorite things. It's always been one of my favorite things about this community is it's a very friendly community. People are very close. I mean, obviously with the outpouring of love and support since the incident happened at Borderline. But, you know, just that kind of guy, it's hard to lose. It's hard to lose a guy. It's hard to lose anybody, but it's really hard to lose a guy like that.
All right, thank you so much. And I believe we now are about to begin.
Cara, thank you, and please extend our gratitude and our thoughts to Deputy Holt as well. Let's listen in to the memorial service for Sergeant Ron Helus.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Day. I'm the care pastor here at Calvary Community Church, and on behalf of our entire congregation and our entire staff, we'd like to welcome you. Our facilities are yours. I'll let you know that our congregation and our staff have been praying for Karen and Jordan and all of your family for this past week. We've been praying for the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, and we appreciate you, and we love you. We want you to know that. That's the way we feel here at Calvary. We know that this has been a difficult time for all of us. And we know that this is a difficult day, and yet this is an important day that we come to honor Sergeant Ron Helus's life. Would you agree with that? This is an important day to come and to show our gratitude for his life. This is not a funeral per se. This is a memorial service where we come to celebrate Ron and his faith in Jesus Christ and his family. And so I think we've come to stand up for a man today. So I think we should start by saying if Sergeant Ron Helus has touched your life in any way, I'd like you to get up and let's give him a standing ovation right now. Would you do that, please?
You may be seated. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Smith, and on behalf of the family, we would like to thank you for being here. Ron was my uncle and godfather, and he was as protective as those titles would suggest. He was always looking out for his family and friends. Years ago, after I received my learner's permit, Ron overheard at Thanksgiving that I had never driven on the freeway and that I was a bit nervous about the prospect. He then volunteered to take me out in his new blue truck. At that point, I was more worried about wrecking his truck than driving on the freeway. However, with his encouragement, I was able to conquer my fear of freeway driving. At the same time, I was still honing my basic driving skills because as we pulled back up to the house, I ran the side mirror right into the call box and scratched Ron's brand new truck. But instead of getting upset, he calmly thought of my feelings first and about the room full of people we'd be returning to, and said, let's just keep this our secret. And don't worry, it's just a truck. Ron understood what was most important. He valued people and experiences. Every year, he would take a trip to Mammoth with his son Jordan, and they would go camping and fish, and he truly treasured that time with him. He would spend the next year talking about the years past and the upcoming trip that they would have, and he would just go on and on about how much fun they would have together. He couldn't wait until my son was old enough so he could bring him along and teach him how to fish. In the last few days, our family has experienced an outpouring of love that is nothing short of inspiring. We are overwhelmed by the level of care and sympathy that this community, our community, has shown us. My family's world has been shaken by the loss of a husband, a father, an uncle, a brother, a nephew, son, and dear friend. We mourn with all of the others who lost their loved ones. There are many more nights of pain and processing to come, and in those times we may feel lost, alone, and as though the world is full of darkness. But I pray that we may find comfort in knowing, as Ron did, that this world is only temporary, and that we are not alone. As it is written in John 16:33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Please pray with me. Lord, I pray that you would fill our hearts with a peace that can only come from you. That you would remind us daily that while Ron was always the first to care and love us here on earth, that he is now resting in your care. In times of sorrow and doubt, I pray that you would guide us to you and that we would find comfort in your plan and in your will. I pray that you would be with Karen and Jordan and everyone whose lives Ron has so deeply touched, and that they may see the beautiful sacrifice that Ron made and know that in life and in death, he put others before himself. Lord, we thank you for the time we had with Uncle Ron. Thank you for blessing our family and our community with him. In your name we pray, amen. Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Well, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fear relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, where we've no less days all to sing God's sweet praise than when we first begun. Could I ask everybody to stand up and sing this last chorus with us one time? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Well, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. I was blind, but now I see. Lord, I see. It's humbling to be in this room with y'all. So many heroes in this room. And today we're here to honor this hero, Mr. Ron Helus, that's touched us all here in America, touched the world. I met the family earlier, and I told them that they're probably going to need to change the definition in the dictionary of hero. I think from now on it can just be a picture of Ron Helus and his bravery. This man's a true definition of a hero. I also heard you say that he would give anything, give the shirt off his back for other people, and gave his own life. And this is a song about that selfless dedication. This man is a true definition of some gave all. I knew a man, called him Sandy Kane. Few folks even knew his name. But a hero, yes, was he. Left a boy, come back a man. Still many just don't understand about the reasons we are free. I can't forget the look in his eyes oh, the tears he cried as he said these words to me. All gave some gave all. Some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. If you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall. Yeah, recall. Some gave all. Sandy Kane is no longer here, but his words are oh so clear as they echo throughout our land. For all his friends who gave us all, who stood the ground and took the fall to help their fellow man. Love your country, live with pride. Don't forget those who died. America, can't you see? All gave some gave all. Some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. If you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall. Yeah, recall. Some gave all. Liberty. Some give all. Na 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 na. Some gave all.
If you'd like to, you can thank them. That's a memory you won't forget. That's a gift. I want to draw your attention to a sheet of paper that was handed you as you came in the door. It's a memory sheet. I think that's what it says on it. I think we're going to ask you to write some stories about Ron on those. You know, I think one of the really great gifts that God gives us is memory. Some of us get a little older and we don't think we have that good a memory, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, as I even speak of this, you're thinking right now of something that you and Ron did, good or bad, although he was pretty clean. We'd like you to write those stories down. Take the time In the lobby after the service, there's tables everywhere. You'll see baskets, wicker baskets on all these tables that have black tablecloths. And if you'll write those stories and put them in the basket, we're going to give Karen and Jordan volumes of these stories. Listen to me. Listen to me. These things just will fill their heart for years. So please do that. Memories. We need to make memories. Memories like Ronald Lee Heelis was born July 21st, 1964 in West Hills Hospital. Born to Richard and Lois Heelis of Canoga Park. Ron's dad worked in the aerospace industry. Ron went to Parkman Junior High. That's when they were junior highs, and both Taft and Canoga Park High Schools. He was a baseball player when he was younger, loved baseball. But when he was in high school, he played football. And his dad, Jordan says, my dad was at all the games. He said the problem was my dad just couldn't go sit down. So he was on the sidelines constantly screaming. He loved to ride dirt bikes with his friends and his father. As a teenager, Ron took Shotokan karate. He worked out at the West Valley Karate Club with the special man some of you may know, Tony Johnson. Tony Johnson came around Ron, his life. He mentored a bunch of young people and believed in building young people to be men of integrity. And so Tony was a mentor to these kids. And Ron was a part of the Lost Boys Club after his father passed away. It was made up of kids who didn't have fathers or simply came from families where the father wasn't present. And Tony was there with them and mentored those kids. And as you saw Ron, as you worked with Ron, as you knew Ron, he was one of these men that loved to build people. I wonder if it came from that. In 1986, while going to church with Brett and Donna Major, Ron gave his life to Jesus Christ and became a Christian. And that experience and that commitment would change his life forever and set a whole new direction for how he saw life and how he saw people and how he saw eternity. He became a follower of Jesus. So following high school, Ron attended Pierce College. And in the fall of 1978, and I'm laughing because Karen was laughing when she told me this. I said, well, how'd you meet Ron? She said, well, I met him in an anatomy class. And then she starts laughing. And it was in the anatomy class that Karen was asking Ron for help. Not in anatomy, but dissecting a cat. A stray cat. So Ron and Karen would begin to study and study and study for the anatomy class. And at the end of the anatomy class, Karen got the A and Ron got the B. It's the way it always is, guys. So their official first date was on this date today, I think 31 years ago, November 15th, 1987. Isn't that wild? Ron proposed on September 3rd, 1988, and she said, man, was this guy nervous. And here's what he did. It was a pretty good idea, actually. He bought this beautiful ring. It was I believe it was in a blue box. And at some time at dinner, he slipped it into Karen's purse. She had a black purse, like a lot of purses are. And so at one point, she went to the ladies' room and opened her purse. And in this purse, she sees this blue box. So she opens the blue box and sees this beautiful engagement ring, and she freaks out. I mean, she's like fearful. She's thinking, oh my gosh, somebody bought this beautiful ring for somebody, and and it's a black purse like anybody could have. So she's like really, really angst about this. So she comes out of the bathroom, goes up to Ron, and says, Ron, look at this. And she opens it up, and Ron gets down on one knee right there in the restaurant, asks her to marry him. History. They were in the old Charlie Brown's restaurant. which is now the borderline. How ironic. Here's what I learned. That man loved that woman, and that woman loved that man. And that carried through their marriage. So they got married July 1st, 1989 at the United Methodist Church in Thousand Oaks. They were members of a brand new church plant where you start churches, you know, in the valley. I think it was in the valley, Fountain Springs Church, but it was such a new church they needed a place. Ron and Karen would then find their first apartment in Thousand Oaks. Ron began the academy in September of 1989. Karen went to work for Agura Family Chiropractic, and they joined a brand new church in Newbury Park. Their new life was headed forward. Ron graduated the academy in October of 1990. He worked in the jail for a time, of course, was a detective working property crimes. He worked SWAT from 1994 to 2001. He worked narcotics. He was a firearms instructor for Ventura County Sheriff's Department. When he was promoted to sergeant, he worked the jail again, of course. And then he was moved to East Valley, where he was a patrol sergeant with a crew of deputies. And I think he had a partner patrol sergeant, and she had her group of deputies. Sergeant Ronald Heelis served for 29 years with integrity. That's what we all hope to do, and whatever we do is to serve and finish well and serve with integrity. Karen said he lived for that job and for those deputies. Ron had his master's in administrative leadership from University of Oklahoma. During that time, he did the SLI series. He loved mentoring and building people. He loved his deputies. He cared about their lives, their professional lives, their private lives. He would say to Karen, I hope I'm making a difference both in the public and in the department. And even on the streets, he'd roll up, you know, this cul-de-sac story where the kids are spinning their wheels and there's smoke going everywhere. And he'd roll up and he'd want to spend time with people on the streets and get to know them so they could get to know the sheriff's department. And this one story, he rolls up on these kids and they're going, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. And he says, oh, I know. I just want to see your motors. Oh, pop your hoods. And he'd check out the motors in their cars and talk with them and spend time with them. And then someone told me this story. I can't tell you who. And I gag order. Every once in a while, not all the time. You heard me say that, right? Not all the time. But every once in a while, he'd pull somebody over for something simple. And they'd say, I'm sorry, officer. I'm sorry, officer. I'm sorry, officer. And he'd let them tell their story. And then he'd tell them why what they did was wrong. And then with his pad in his hand and his pen, he'd say, okay, if you tell me a good joke, I won't write you a ticket. I apologize, Sheriff. That's probably going to change the way your people do traffic. Jordan Tyler Heelis. What a great young man. Well, he was born March 16th, 1994 at Desert Hospital. Now listen, Ron and Karen chose Jordan for adoption. They were there throughout the entire pregnancy. One of the things I've learned about this family is that they love Jesus. They get what that means, and they really work at, in all aspects of their lives, living and loving like Jesus Christ every day. Pastor Charlie Maloney will be up here in a couple of minutes, and he'll read a few of the family's testimonies. They belonged to the church in which Charlie served for, decades. Camarillo Christian Church, and Jordan went to Cornerstone Christian School, which was a part of that church. Now Ron's family worships at Calvary Nexus in Camarillo, and Pastor Bruce Zachary, whom we love, was in Turkey on a missions group, with a missions group, or he'd be up here. And then we just found out he just came home, so he's here today. And they love Calvary Nexus. They love their pastor, Bruce Zachary. Ron believed in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That scripture drove the roots and the foundation into Ron and Karen and Jordan's lives and gave them direction every single day. How they did work, how they did family, how they did everything that they did, that they've done. Karen said that Ron was such a selfless human being. He always took care of her. Karen said that her husband valued their relationship. She said, he made me a priority. He was an amazing husband and father, always protecting us. Listen to his favorite scripture. And if you knew him, you'll get this. His favorite scripture was Psalm 144:1. Praise be to the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Jordan talked about his dad always being there at his football games. Lauren talked about that. They hiked together, they backpacked together, they rode bikes together, they loved fishing together. If you knew Ron, Ron loved to fish, right? Ron loved to fish. Did I say that Ron loved to fish? Well, he loved to fish with his partner. Mammoth was the place, the Eastern Sierras, and they'd go up there since really Jordan was 5, a couple times a year. And then when Jordan became a teenager, 2 or 3 times a year. And he also loved to follow bears. And so Jordan tells a story. He did. He loved wildlife. And when he saw bears, he'd follow bears with his camera. And then one day he followed a bear that was a sow that had 2 cubs. And the bear turned on him, and he ended up on the ground with his camera. So for those of you watching at home, do not follow bears. When I walked into the Helis' house, I was greeted by a beautiful, decorated Christmas tree. So if you know them, they decorate early. And she and Ron decorated that tree on the 7th. And their house full of decorations all year long. Maybe many of you do this. They'd buy gifts for Christmas, and those gifts are already wrapped in other rooms. And the theme of that house is hope. It's so great because you see hope in frames, hope in standing things, hope all over the house. And because they found hope in Jesus, the hope that has grounded them in their lives, the hope that has given them the strength to go through this time, and the hope that they want you to have, to know that God will give you the strength to get through this time, the hope that founded their lives through their faith in the person of Jesus Christ. And here is a scripture that is up on their home. It's good for us right now. It's like medicine to us right now. Romans 5:3, it says we glory in, or we even worship God in our sufferings, because we know that sufferings produce perseverance, and perseverance produces character, And character produces hope. And it's not the hope, I hope I get my paycheck this week. It's the hope that gives us strength for tomorrow. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us through Jesus Christ. What a beautiful, beautiful scripture. And Karen said, because of that hope, I'll accept this. But she said, I'll miss Ron's caring presence. She said she already has. I'll miss his laughter and his humor that has always filled this home. She also said she has been overwhelmed and blessed by the Ventura County Sheriff's Department and how you have treated she and her family. And by those that she knows and she doesn't know that have reached out to she and Jordan. We love you too. We will not stop praying, and we will be there for you, all of us. I'd like to introduce Pastor Charlie Maloney to come up and read some of the family's testimonies.
It is my honor to read what Karen has written about her husband. Barry Archie, Ron's father-in-law, expressed some beautiful words. And on behalf of Camarillo Christian Church and Cornerstone Christian School and all of the relationships that exist because of those contacts, our prayers and our thoughts and our hearts go out to you, Karen, and Jordan, and to your family. Who was Ron Helus? Barry Archie writes. He was a husband, father, family member in a large Christian family. Ron loved talking to and being with people. He enjoyed helping others. If you ask him what he enjoyed most, he would say his relationship with God, being with his wife, his son, his family, fishing, of course, and being a sergeant. If you called him a hero, he'd probably laugh at you, and he would say he was just doing his job. Ron did something heroic. He helped save lives in a tragic, horrible incident that took 13 lives. Barry writes, as I watched the procession from the hospital to the Ventura Medical Examiner's office, he said, I observed thousands of people lining the streets, people lining the bridges and stopped cars on the freeway to pay their respect for what Ron had done. Most of these people had never met him or knew him, but they honored him for his actions, actions that cost him his life. Barry said, I saw the goodness in people, including the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, many first responders, military, people at his gym, family, friends, the community, including many people who never met him. He said, I used to laugh at Ron's last name, Helus. But maybe God wants to use Ron to help heal us. I'd say amen to that. Jesus tells us to love one another, to be kind, to be loving, and to care for each other. Maybe God wants to use this situation to help heal us from all of the violence. Barry continues, If the goodness I saw from thousands is an example of who we are, then we need to exercise that goodness in every aspect of our lives. If we all helped and loved and cared for each other, wouldn't our world be a better place? Indeed. Love can conquer all. So showing that love with our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers, that would be a good start to helping change our world. Ron called his wife shortly before the shooting. He told her that he loved her. That will remain with her the rest of her life. And all of us are touched by that kind of love and commitment. So he concludes, tell the people around you and the people nearest to you how much you love them, as we never know if this will be the last opportunity to express that love to those we love and care for. Hug your friends, hug your family, hug some strangers, and treat them with kindness and respect, and we will be living in a better world. And remember, above all, he says, God loves you. John 15:13 reminds us, a greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Karen has written this letter to her beloved husband. Ron, thank you for sharing the last 31 years with me. You were my husband and best friend. You were always the one who made me laugh and protected me from all that tried to harm me. Thank you for being you, my hero, my love, and my life. I will always love you and hold a special place in my heart that is only for you. I know that when God saw you enter heaven, he said, well done, good and faithful servant. I think we'd amen that as well. I'm so proud of you and the kind of person you were. I will miss you and your hugs and our life together. Rest now, sweetie. Save a place up there for me, and I will see you again. Love you forever. Karen.
I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I would do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine, yeah. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when all I would do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
Good afternoon. I'd like to personally extend my sincerest thanks and appreciation to each and every one of you for honoring Ron, his family, his extended Sheriff's Office family, with your presence here today. We feel your love and support, and it helps us through the healing process. So I really appreciate that. You may not have known Ron personally, but each of you knew him. Ron was one we all counted on to protect us and our businesses, our homes, while we go about our daily lives. He was one of us, a member of the community, a husband, a father, a sheriff's sergeant, with a tremendous commitment to this community to keep it safe and to protect those who call this beautiful place home. I often say that our profession is entirely about people. Our success is measured in how we interact with people. Most of us take a while to figure that out. Ron knew it from the start. He lived it every day, and he shared that gift with everyone he encountered. Ron dared to go where most would flee, and he selflessly ran towards gunfire to confront someone who attacked the innocent. He entered the nightclub with no other purpose than to defend the defenseless and to save their lives, and lives he did save. Webster's dictionary defines a hero as a figure in mythology and legend renowned for great strength, courage, and daring. I agree with every part of that definition except for the mythology part. Ron was real, a mortal like the rest of us, and he's left an indelible mark on this community and the people he served. Since his career beginnings in 1989, Ron was always actively engaged. He's kind of an intense guy. He earned the name Ronbo when we were in the SWAT team together. Took his job very seriously, and he was ready to face any threat. He trained throughout his career as a member of the SWAT team. He was a firearms instructor, a defensive tactics instructor. He was a martial artist. His commitment to training was something he shared with the younger, less experienced deputies on his shift. He loved teaching them about proper tactics, and his briefings were always woven with words of encouragement and the information they needed to succeed and be safe. Ron actually took the time to scout locations in Thousand Oaks that could be the targets of a mass shooter. He recognized that even though it's a safe community, that something like that could strike anywhere. And he worked out the details of how he and his other deputies would wish to respond to such a threat, because he recognized that was such a concern. I found a consistent theme in the words written in Ron's personnel file describing his work throughout his career. Commendable, admirable, actively engaged, training, teaching, mentoring, tactically sound. Ron enjoyed imparting his knowledge of investigative skills and narcotics enforcement, having worked both as a detective in Thousand Oaks as a narcotics investigator for a number of years. He sincerely believed that in sharing information he had learned through experience, he could help others achieve success and stay safe. He was a sergeant's sergeant. Ron was known to tell an occasional tall tale. He was a fisherman, after all. He would occasionally arrive late to work, and on one such occasion, one of his sergeants laughed about Ron once walking in and saying, in the classic way only Ron can say it, sort of a karate back stance, and hey bro, sorry I'm a little late, I just got done doing 500 side kicks and benching 500 pounds. And the other sergeant said, Ron, dude, you still have sleep in your eyes, and you're not sweating. And Ron produced his signature Cheshire cat grin, and they both laughed. The next day, Ron was a few minutes late again. He walked up to the other sergeant with water on his face and gave the same story as the day before. His partner said, Ron, dude, that is not sweat. I was in the locker room, I saw you splashing water on your face. Come on. and they both shared a good laugh like they did many, many times. That same sergeant, when he was going through a difficult time in his own personal life, said Ron truly cared about him and often checked on him to see how he was doing. That was Ron, to take the time to listen and show great empathy for those he worked with and those he served. Every shift they worked together, Ron would tell him, "You need anything, bro? I got your back." A deputy on Ron's shift said, "Ron was always the sergeant I wanted to respond to my hot calls or calls where it was dangerous or rapidly unfolding. When I would hear 4 SAM 3 arrive on scene, there was a sense of calm that would come over the other deputies involved in the incident." When Ron was a field training officer back in 1998, he had a new deputy assigned to him. And naturally, on day one, Ron was driving when he found himself in pursuit of a vehicle through a narrow, winding canyon in the Santa Susana Pass area. The new deputy found herself in the passenger seat, feeling like she was ready to vomit. And of course, after racing through the canyons at breakneck speed, they caught the bad guy, which is something Ron loved to do. But that deputy remembers Ron from that day and that time as always being somebody who truly cared for his troops. And he always said the bottom line is that we all go home to our families at the end of the shift. Another of Ron's fellow sergeants said, "Ron was, without a doubt, the guy you'd want in a volatile situation, especially when it involved tactics or something where we had to prepare for lethal force. Ron was a great shot. He used great tactics. He was clearly fearless and confident in his abilities. That is what a sergeant and a leader is, and this was Ron." And when you work long shifts together, it's amazing how much you get to know someone and how close you become. Ron's partner over the last 18 months said, "We shared our personal lives, our opinions, our dreams, whatever other crazy topics come up at 2 a.m. over coffee at 7-Eleven. We spent more time together than I spent with my own brothers. We loved trying new restaurants in Thousand Oaks, and we would joke about how it seemed like date night whenever they found a new one to eat at." Threaded in all those late night deep conversations between calls, Ron would talk about his son, Jordan, and how proud he was of him. It was actually somewhat annoying because every time I talked to him, that's all he would talk about, his family and his son, and I wanted to tell him about mine and could never get a word in edgewise. But Ron was extremely proud of Jordan and would always talk about their next trip to the mountains. He loved his family. And he loved people, which is what drew him to this profession, to go out into the community and stand between the good citizens and those that would do us harm. This community owes Ron a debt of gratitude, not just for how he died, but forever in how he lived and in his service to people. We shall always remember his sacrifice. In some ways, I believe Ron would find it perfect that in his final moments, he was able to reveal his true character to all of us and teach us all his greatest lesson, that of fearlessness in the face of certain danger and selfless service to the community he loved. Ron, we love you, brother, and we miss you. Thank you for showing us all how to be better people. You truly are a hero.
We thought it'd be a beautiful way to end the service by hearing these words again of the song, "I Can Only Imagine." But I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. That day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I would do is forever, forever worship you. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. Oh, surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? To my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak it all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine.
If you'd like to join hands with those beside you, we'd encourage you to do that. You don't have to. Let's bow our heads and let's thank God for this time. Father, silence is good. You've said, be still and know that you're God. And we know that you know about all this. We're the ones that don't understand it on any level. So we thank you, though, for this day, during this time, that we've been able to be together because you've made us to know and be known and to love and be loved, to be in relationship. So for the words, for the scriptures, for the songs, for the encouragement, and for your presence, God, we thank you. Give us, we pray, the strength to walk through this grief, to walk through this sorrow, believing that there will come a time, because of the hope that you bring, that we will be on the other side of it and we will be helping others. So give us your hope that comes from your Son, Jesus, today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Now I'd like to encourage you to stay seated, but I'd like to invite all our law enforcement personnel in uniforms, please. Would you stand and exit? And you'll be getting ready for the cordon. Everybody else, please stay seated.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is extended live coverage on CBS 2 of the memorial service for Ventura County Sergeant Ron Heelis, who was shot and killed 8 days ago. On the left side of your screen, you see inside the church where the memorial service is concluding. Right side of your screen, you see that long line of law enforcement officers proceeding out of the Calvary Church. This is in Thousand Oaks. Sergeant Ron Heelis remembered as a hero today. The 54-year-old died when he took on an active shooter at the Borderline Bar and Grill. That was last Wednesday night. And we know in the 8 days since then, this community really has not had a time to grieve. They've been evacuated. They've been devastated by the Woolsey fire. Some people inside that church lost their homes and everything they owned. We've heard that some of them were actually injured during the fires. We are anticipating there will be a short procession to Pierce Brothers, a cemetery in Westlake Village, where Sergeant Heelis will be buried with a full law enforcement honors this afternoon. And we do anticipate that people are going to be lining the streets once again there in Westlake Village. It was 1 week ago when we saw that sad sight. It was a much longer procession, about 25 miles from Los Robles Hospital, where the sergeant was taken just after he was shot, to the medical examiner's office. People lining the routes they were on, freeway overpasses, waving American flags, many of them crying, their hands over their hearts in tribute to this hero. So again, right side of your screen, you see people filing out of the Calvary Community Church. We heard from a number of speakers today. It was a touching ceremony, but it was a ceremony that the pastor called not a funeral, but a celebration of life. He actually opened the service today, asking everybody in the congregation, if you have been touched in any way by Sergeant Ron Heelis, that they should stand and give him a standing ovation. And that's exactly what we saw. Again, the service lasted just over 1 hour. Sergeant Heelis killed just about a week ago, and we heard so many stories about how he was a true cop's cop, and so many people, hundreds, if not thousands, wanted to be there today. Our Dave Lopez is just outside the church where people are beginning to gather outside now. Dave, and boy, this was a touching ceremony. We learned not so much about him as a servant, as a sheriff's deputy, but also about him as a family man and as really a good friend.
Well, there's no question about that. He was a very special man. He was loved. He loved people. He and his wife had a very special bond. I found it extremely touching. Maybe ironic isn't the right word for it, but it was mentioned that today, November 15th, is exactly the date that they had their first date. Their first date was on November 15th, 1987. And who would know that life would be so cruel that 31 years later they would be saying goodbye. His wife didn't speak at the funeral today, his wife, Karen, but she wrote a few notes down that was so eloquently delivered by one of the friends of the family, a pastor, who at one point, the wife wrote in her notes, "Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being my rock. I will love you forever." Extremely touching. I mean, there's just no other way to describe this. It was also mentioned that he would cringe if he knew that he was being dubbed a hero. Instead, he would say, "I was just doing my job." He had the nickname of Ronbo because of the way he did his tactics when he was on the SWAT team. They talk about his sense of humor. Apparently, he had a propensity to be late for work, and they also said being a fisherman. Stories a little bit. One day that caught my eye, made me chuckle a little bit. He said he came in late and told his supervising officer that, I'm sorry I'm late, but I just finished doing 50 reps and I don't know how many sit-ups at the gym. And the officer looked at him and said, "Look, you still got the sleep in your eye. You're not sweating." And then I guess the next day he was late again, and this time he went in the bathroom to splash his face as though he'd been sweating. And his commanding officer says, "Hey, come on, I saw you in the bathroom splashing water on you." He just sounded like an all-around guy, the kind of guy that you could, nudge up to a bar and have a drink with and talk about anything with him. And that's the way he was portrayed. It was, I thought, very touching that they said this is not a funeral. This is a celebration of life of a man that we were all blessed to know. And indeed, that's the way it was. And I don't know if you can make the move on your camera from here. Something very interesting has happened. There is a hotel right across from where we are. And all of the employees, we're on live television, so excuse the little moment of interruption there. All those employees down the street, all those people down the street, they're all employees from the hotel. And they came out about maybe 30 minutes ago. You can see some in their chef's uniform, in their working garb, in their suits and what have you. And they all came out, and they're all standing at attention there. A number of other people are out here. It's not a huge crowd yet, but I think the crowd will start to gather later on. It's not a very long procession from here to the where they're going to bury him. Behind me, you can see the huge American flag. And little by little, people are starting to come out. The church was packed, as well be expected. And I think you also mentioned the fact that it was repeated over and over again of his love, of his loyalty. He became a sheriff deputy because he loved people. I also found it interesting at one of the speakers said that it was the current sheriff that said that, Sheriff, get his name out here, and Sheriff Bill Ayub, who said that Ron actually would scout areas in the city. He said even though he knew that the city was a very safe place, he would actually scout areas on where trouble could be, mass shootings or trouble spots and what have you. And that's how thorough he was. He would not leave anything to chance. So when people talk about the fact that how he was killed, let's not get the impression that he just went in there willy-nilly John Wayne style. He knew what he was doing. This man was a top professional. He was a top officer. He was probably the elite of the elite in what he did. And he went in there without any hesitation. And there's no question in the minds of many people that what he did probably saved a lot of lives. So it was a wonderful tribute to him. His wife of 31 years was there, his son Jordan. Neither one of them spoke, but like I said, it was very eloquent statements to make. It was we certainly had an opportunity to get an inside glimpse of who this man is. And I think it was once said, you cannot leave more of an impression on people than to have good memories, good moments, good thoughts. And we certainly had a basket full of those today. I'll send it back to you.
Dave, thank you. Dave Lopez outside Calvary Community Church, where we are remembering Sergeant Ron Helus. And you see the procession outside the church. His wife is there, his wife Karen, his son, 24 years old, we heard, and Saul. So many memories from that family today. His family did not speak except for his niece, who gave a loving tribute and talked about what a good guy her uncle was, that he was the one who took her on her first drive on the freeway when she just got her driver's license, and talked about how scared she was because he had a brand new truck. And wouldn't you know it, she scratched it, and realizing that she was embarrassed, and although he was probably upset about his new truck showing the character that he had, he said, let's just keep this our secret. Sergeant Ron Helus, as we heard from so many people today, was a man who cared about others and put their feelings and their safety first. So we are watching now. The procession will begin momentarily as his body is carried from the church to Pierce Brothers Cemetery in Westlake Village, where he will be buried. A very short procession. It is about 1 mile away. We heard from a number of people today, including the pastor, Steve Ray, from the church, who described Ron as a loving man, a man who took his job very seriously, but a man who always put his family first. He was described by the relatively new sheriff, who's been on the job for less than a week, as loyal, dependable, brave, a man who was always meticulous in his job. And as you just heard Dave say, he actually was concerned about the possibility of an active shooter in that community and scouted out locations, a man who wanted to be prepared for anything to protect his community. His neighbors knew that they could count on Sergeant Ron Helus. And in the days leading up to this, we have heard their stories of how he was the guy who always wanted to pitch in and help. He was always barbecuing something in the backyard, always willing to invite people over. He was the guy they called in the middle of the night if they needed anything. Again, we mentioned his wife did not speak, but Dave told you about that letter that was read. She wrote a letter to her husband, a family of deep faith. She called him my hero, my love, and my life, ending it with, I will miss you and your hugs. There was also an opportunity for everybody that was gathered there today to share their stories of Sergeant Ron Helus. They were given papers that were labeled memorial, and they were encouraged to write stories of Sergeant Ron Helus, even humorous stories, to share with the family. And the pastor explained how they could put them in baskets as they now exit the church, and said that those letters would provide comfort for the family for many, many years to come. Again, we are remembering Sergeant Ron Helus from the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, a 29-year-old veteran who had plans to retire within the next year, a man who loved the outdoors. We saw in that video tribute the pictures of him, loved Lake Mammoth, loved fishing, loved to be outdoors, but a man who also served his community from inside a patrol car. We heard some humorous stories about Sergeant Helus as well. The pastor sharing a story of how he came upon a group of guys, might have looked suspicious to the sergeant. He pulled over, engaged with them, and they said, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. And he said, I know, I just want to see what's under your hood. Other people that he would apparently, if they weren't guilty of a serious traffic infraction, he would let them off without a ticket, as long as they would share a joke with him. Sergeant Ron Helus described as a man with a sense of humor, a man who was a good friend. We heard before the service even started, one of his fellow deputies talking outside the church, and he told our Dave Lopez that Sergeant Helus was a man who, even when you didn't see him, he'd come up behind you, pat you on the back, and check in and see how you were doing. That's the kind of friend he was. He was known for his smile, for his kindness, and he was well known in his community, a man who stopped at Starbucks almost every morning for his morning coffee. They knew him there. a man who worked out at his local gym, where they have now put the elliptical trainer that he used off limits to other people. There's a little memorial set up inside the gym. We learned that over the past few years, he earned his master's degree online. He was so determined that he did it even while working full-time for the Sheriff's Department. His wife shared with the pastor that she was extremely proud of him for being able to accomplish that. He was a man who worked with other deputies, who took gun safety seriously and had recently started his own private business training new gun owners on gun safety. And he was looking ahead to those retirement years, getting his master's degree, starting his own business, and beginning to look forward to the time that he would have outside the daily duties of working for the Sheriff's Department. Sergeant Helis, one of just 12 people who was killed by the gunman last Wednesday night at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. Again, on the right side of your screen, the live pictures, you can see the law enforcement officers lined up. We believe there were hundreds, perhaps thousands, inside the church for the service today. The bagpipers now leaving as well. This will be a full honors for the sergeant. Let's go ahead and listen in to what's happening.
forward personnel! Present arms!
It's a somber sight outside the Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village. The casket of Sergeant Ron Hill is 54 years old, killed 8 days ago when he engaged an active shooter at the Borderline Bar and Grill. The casket will be loaded into the hearse and begin a 1-mile journey to the sergeant's final resting place, Pierce Brothers Cemetery in Westlake Village, where he will be buried this afternoon. We have just watched a very touching service inside the church, where we heard how he was a hero not only to this entire community, but to his family. His wife, Karen, married for 31 years, and their 24-year-old son, Jordan. The bagpipers standing by. We heard the Sheriff's Department aerial crew flying overhead just moments ago. Inside today, we heard some beautiful musical tributes, including from singer Billy Ray Cyrus. He sang Amazing Grace, asked the entire congregation to join him for the final chorus. He also sang Some Gave All. And as he looked out at the number of law enforcement gathered there inside the church today, he said, "It is humbling to be among so many heroes in this room." You heard some funny and some heartwarming stories from the pastor, Pastor Steve Day. He talked about the sergeant's love for his wife and his son, how he'd been married for 31 years, and actually the couple's first date was on this very day back in 1987. He also talked about how when the sergeant proposed to his wife, Karen, it happened in the very building where he was shot. It used to be the old Charlie Brown's restaurant, and now it is the Borderline Bar and Grill. Again, Sergeant Helis was one of 12 people killed by a gunman last Wednesday night at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. He was the first officer to go inside, well-trained. He knew what he was doing. Many say that what he did saved so many other lives because there were hundreds of people inside that club. It was college night. A lot of young people, 18 and older, were allowed inside. And many of those people were trapped until Sergeant Helis opened fire on the gunman. Momentarily, the gunman was forced to stop aiming at the crowd and instead turned his gun on Sergeant Helis and the two CHP officers who were coming right behind him. And unfortunately, Sergeant Helis did not survive. As the sheriff said, he was totally committed. He gave his all. And as I told his wife, he died a hero. The sheriff, who was on his last day on the job, said that Sergeant Helis went in there with the intention to save lives, and that's exactly what he did. We know that he was on the telephone with his wife, Karen, just moments before, called her while he was on duty from inside his patrol car, as he often did, and said, "I got to go handle a call. I love you. I'll talk to you later." His wife and his son did not speak at the service today, but the pastor read a letter from his wife, who called him my hero, my love, and my life. She talked about his deep faith and how she would see him again, saying that she missed his hugs. And as you look at the right side of your screen, these aerial pictures now coming in from Sky 2, you can see just how many law enforcement are there. They come not only out of a sense of duty, but out of a sense of honor. These are men and women who do exactly what Sergeant Helis does. Every day when they go to work, they put their lives on the line for others. And as many watch, they realize it could have just as easily been them who took those bullets last week. The service today started with a standing ovation. It was a poignant moment when the pastor asked everybody to stand to celebrate the life, saying this is not a funeral. This is a true celebration of life, of a life well lived. And look at this crowd now gathered outside. We talked to our Dave Lopez, who's there just a few moments ago, and he said that there's a hotel right across from the church and that the employees of the hotel had come outside. And we're standing on the street, some of them in their uniforms, their chef's aprons. And Dave Lopez, I think you're with us. And Dave, it seems like everybody just wants to be able, in some small way, to say thank you to Sergeant Helis.
Those are some of those employees that you're talking about, Sandra. They, as I said, they came out maybe about 45 minutes ago. No big fanfare. They just came out, and they very respectful, very quietly. They're lined up there to pay their respects. We'll pan over a little more to this way. Now you can see the flood of people, and as you go over this way, a flood of people coming out of the church now. A number of different police agencies were marching in unison, and now you can see just the scattering of people that are coming out. It will not be a very long procession, as you mentioned. They'll go up this driveway, make a turn to the left, go down the hill, and to his final resting place, which is just not quite a mile away. They made a very big point today during the service that the sergeant was a man of faith. They made a big point that he became a Christian and devoted his life to doing the good works of a Christian very early in his life before he became a deputy, and that he lived that kind of life. He wanted to do good. He believed very strongly in God, in an afterlife, and in fact, it was very poignant at the end of the letter from his wife to the sergeant. I'll see you one day. You talk to many people who have gone through tragedies like this, unexplainable tragedies. I mean, there's no way to figure out why these things happen. And they always say the same thing whenever we interview people who have gone through tragedy, how strong they are, how they seem to have it all together. And they always say the same thing. It's almost a universal answer. I have a strong belief. And I think that's what this family has. I think most of the people who knew him well, realized that. And so even though there was a very strong sense of sadness today, there was I didn't feel any or get the idea that anybody was angry over what happened, asking why or gnashing of teeth. It's just something that people who have a deep religious belief have to understand, that life can throw you terrible curves at times, and it's your faith that carries you through. I think that was the underlying message here today through the letter from his wife, what was said, and just the actions of the sergeant himself, Helis. In fact, they made a mention about his name. They said that he would often tell that his name is Heal Us. So as you see the crowd keep coming out, a very emotional day. I mean, you don't want to get yourself emotionally involved, but sometimes you just can't help it. You're human, and certain things that you hear and see bring back memories that have happened to you personally. Very, very sad day, but people here came to pay their respects. I think it was, for many, good therapy. The mourning process will not stop. It'll go on. And as the Sheriff Bill Ayub said, at the end, he said, we owe this man a debt of gratitude for what he did and what he was. And I can guarantee you that no one who ever works in law enforcement in Ventura County will ever not know who Sergeant Ron Lee Helis was. He is still here among us. Back to you.
The interesting parts was when they talked about how his nickname was Ronbo when he was a member of the SWAT team, and kind of gave us a look at exactly what kind of police officer he was.
Yeah, there was no question about that. I mean, the sheriff kind of chuckled on that. I mean, he was apparently he was a large man, lost some weight, had some battle of the bulge, if you will, at times, and he was very, very aware of trying to keep in shape, and he was sort of like a He-Man type of person, being on the SWAT team. And the sheriff made it a point saying that he took his job very seriously, maybe sometimes too seriously, but he got the affectionately known as the nickname as Rondo. So, and that drew a lot of chuckles. Obviously, this was a very special man. I mean, you could not help but listen to all of the different things that were said about him, and of course, it's just an outpouring of love. There was just no question about that as you continue to see the crowd leave this church that was just jam-packed.
Dave, thank you for that. Dave Lopez outside the Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village, where we are remembering Sergeant Ron Helis. The memorial service just ended. Now begins the procession to Pierce Brothers, where the sergeant will be buried this afternoon. We will continue our live coverage of the procession on CBSLA.com. We will leave you now with another look at the memorial service for Sergeant Ron Helis.
My family's world has been shaken by the loss of a husband, a father, an uncle, a brother, a nephew, son, and dear friend.
I see, oh Lord, I see.
Memories. We need to make memories. Memories like Ronald Lee Helis was born July 21st, 1964 in West Hills Hospital, born to Richard and Lois Helis of Canoga Park.
John 15:13 reminds us, a greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends.
I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine.
Ron actually took the time to scout locations in Thousand Oaks that could be the targets of a mass shooter. He recognized that even though it's a safe community, that something like that could strike anywhere. And he worked out the details of how he and his other deputies would wish to respond to such a threat, because he recognized that was such a concern. In some ways, I believe Ron would find it perfect that in his final moments, he was able to reveal his true character to all of us and teach us all his greatest lesson, that of fearlessness in the face of certain danger and selfless service to the community he loved. Ron, we love you, brother, and we miss you. Thank you for showing us all how to be better people.
When all I will do is forever worship you. I can only imagine.
Next ET,